Welcome to Season 2 of Nuances Beyond First Impressions with the Asian Diaspora. Together, we wanted to create a safe space where everyone can learn more about our diverse communities, the complicated relationships we have with our culture, and how they intersect with feminism, queerness, disability, anti-racism, career choices, politics, and more.
I'm Ariadne Mila, a Filipino-American from a small town on the southern border of Texas.
And I'm Sherilyn Lee, aka Lazu, a new American originally from the only place a dodo bird ever lived, Mauritius. For our definitions today, we have the patriarchy, which is a social system in which positions of dominance and privilege are primarily held by men. Yes, our society is a patriarchy. As always, definitions, takeaways, and links are in the show notes. You can find them anywhere you're listening to this podcast right now or on our website, nuancespod.com. Our guest today is Summer Swee-Singh. Summer is an Asian American studio and touring pianist and keyboardist. She is also an arranger, composer, music director, string contractor, backing vocalist, and music educator. Summer graduated UC Berkeley with a BA in legal studies and a music minor. After graduating, she worked at the Jones Day law firm in San Francisco as their recruiting and HR assistant. But instead of applying to law school as planned, she decided to take a chance on her passion, music. Having no music industry connections, she cold called her way into her first piano residencies. Posting her unique piano and string arrangements on social media led to her first touring experiences with the band Circa Survive. Now, Summer's notable studio and live performance credits include BB Rexa, Kashmir, Chon, Circa Survive, and so many more. Summer also founded and runs the blog AAPI Musicians and its corresponding Instagram account, which spotlights established AAPI music creators and touring pros.
Summer, thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
You have had quite a career in music, so why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Sure. I wasn't planning on doing music. There was definitely a bit of a tumultuous time when I was figuring out whether or not this was the direction I wanted to go. And once I committed to it, I just thought, okay, I have to think about this in terms of work and being a business. I need to think of it in terms of how can I cover my bills and just be financially stable at the very least, because I know that would be of utmost importance to my parents, since that's one of their main reasons, clearly, for wanting me to pursue law or a medical degree or something that is a traditionally successful Asian profession. And so as soon as I realized I was already making enough money just playing music on the side when I was working at the law firm that I could cover all my bills just from doing that, I realized that, okay, this might be more financially viable than I thought, because my mom had always told me when I was younger, oh, musicians live in cardboard boxes on the side of the street and are essentially homeless. Being a musician is not a career that anyone would want unless you're really famous, and only those people are famous because they have the right connections and things like that. Clearly, neither of my parents were in the music industry. They didn't necessarily have the perspective of being able to be a musician that's not Beyonce or the largest pop star name. They just felt like you're either huge or it's just not going to work at all. So I knew from the beginning that I would have to have either a ton of different gigs or wear many different hats. So I first started playing at a few different residencies. I found literally by writing different people, and I was running around doing all those things every week, and then also started teaching lessons and then playing one-off weddings and just trying to get my name out there. But I realized that I was a little bit limited in the Bay Area. There is a music scene, don't get me wrong, but it just didn't seem quite as large as what I'd heard about in LA. And so it became pretty clear to me that if I really were to take this seriously, I would have to make the move at some point just to really give myself a real shot. That's when I decided, okay, I'm going to try and find a bigger residency and continue doing the things that I'd already done, like teaching, playing weddings, and just taking it a little bit more seriously and finding better outlets to get leads. I found this website called Gig Salad. I got a lot of gigs from there. I joined Thumbtack, finding both students and gigs from that. I did a bunch of different research trying to figure out what are the best ways to get gigs. And of course, doing this thing that I knew was tried and true, yet very time consuming, which was just cold calling people to see if someone needed a pianist. And so I called over 300 hotels within Southern California and basically asked if anyone needed a pianist. And most people just wouldn't give me the time of day. I think people were just annoyed, like, why is this random person calling me? Like, some people just didn't even have a piano. But I was always just trying and figured the least that I could do was put my name out there. And then even if they don't have a piano, maybe they would want to hire someone who could bring their own keyboard. I did that, and surprisingly, it did land me my first big residency, which was at the Balboa Bay Resort in Newport Beach. That was a great opportunity for me because it was a very consistent gig and it gave me more financial freedom to spend more time looking for other gigs like one-offs such as weddings, corporate events, etc. And also gave me time to get back to posting on my YouTube channel. And it was my YouTube channel that led to me doing studio and touring work. Eventually, that's when I decided, okay, maybe I could cover more of my favorite artists, and who knows, maybe one of them would notice me. And essentially that happened. And I still remember just being so incredibly shocked that anyone wanted to work with me based on what I had put out there, because it was all iPhone video on my camera from 2016. I had no microphone set up. It was all just phone audio. So it wasn't anything like professional, but it did showcase what we could do. So there was very minimal editing. Everything was recorded live, but it did really represent what my arranging capabilities were like. And it definitely allowed me to practice and strengthen that muscle because I'd never taken any sort of arranging classes or composition classes. So it was just me practicing and figuring out, oh, what sounds good, working with actual musicians who did play, who were pros on violin, viola, cello, taking the time to ask them questions about their instrument, what sounds good to them, what's the best range, etc. on their instrument, really helped my knowledge base expand and really helped me write better arrangements. And then once the studio and touring work started taking off, it was really just that Circa gig. And then this DJ, Kashmir, found me. And surprisingly, he really liked my work. At that point, when I had just the credits of Kashmir and Circa on my resume, it was so much easier to get other gigs. And one gig would lead to another, whether it's because I had more credits or because it was by word of mouth. So that led to me working with Chan, etc. And obviously, everything had to take a little bit of a break during the pandemic, but now things are back and I'm back to doing that. And also working a lot on my own music as well.
That's awesome. We're just blown away by it. So when did you start playing music? Did you start piano or violin as a kid?
Yes, I was really shy when I was really young. It was my first grade teacher who, during a parent-teacher conference, told my parents, Summer doesn't speak up in class. She's super quiet. She barely interacts with the other kids. You need to sign her up for some group activity. My parents took that and they were like, let's sign her up for group keyboard lessons. And that was really the start of everything. I was 7 years old and I remember initially not taking to it. I remember them sending me home with some weird little whiteboard and little black note magnets that we had to practice on this chart and figure out where the notes were. And I just remember being very frustrated with it and crying and doing my homework and just thinking, oh my gosh, this is so tough. I don't understand it. I don't know what I'm doing. And my mom just saying, you have to do it. You've committed to this. We're going to at least see it through for at least a few years. It's okay. Thanks to them, I stuck with it. Probably after about 3 or 4 years is when I really started to enjoy it. I'd started doing a lot of ear training. I took the group lessons at Yamaha music schools, and they did focus quite a bit on ear training as well, in addition to the theory and the technical portion of things. And I tried to start playing things that I liked by ear. And that's really when it just seemed to open an entire different world of music to me. Because I just thought, oh my goodness, I don't have to only play this Bach invention that my teacher is telling me to play. I can play something really cool. I still remember trying to figure out this random Spice Girls melody back in the day because all the popular kids listened to Spice Girls. And I remember begging my parents to let me get a Spice Girls CD. They were all very like, Summer, you're going to strictly listen to classical music until at least high school because we want you to have a great foundation. They were a little weirdly elitist about classical music. And so I was strictly allowed to listen to only that plus one Spice Girls CD and the Space Jam soundtrack. I loved that movie as a child. Don't play basketball, but still phenomenal movie. And that was my life until about high school. And that's when I got introduced to other non-classical music that just absolutely blew my mind. And that's when I really started expanding on playing by ear. I discovered Linkin Park early high school. It was one of those bands that was just huge. And this is 2003, 2004. My friend Thomas burnt me Hybrid Theory. And I'd never heard anything remotely like this in my life. And I just thought, wow, music could be like this? I love music. I want to make music like this. How cool is that? And that's when I also found out that one guy in that band was Japanese, Mike Shinoda. I just thought, oh my goodness, wait, so there's Asian people doing this too? They're not all playing classical music? It just absolutely blew my mind. Suddenly, music was much more than just this chore that I had to do to make my parents happy, because I was playing both violin and piano at that time. Violin, absolutely terribly. I think my parents understood my limitations on the instrument. This is just mostly good just to put on your resume. You don't need to necessarily practice violin as much, but piano we want you to really excel at so that you can also put this on your resume to get into a good college, so therefore you can go and be a lawyer or a doctor or some sort of more accepted role in society.
Yeah.
Rather than a musician.
Why don't you talk a little bit about growing up and being the minority, and how was that for you? Sherry and I have definitely experienced wanting to be white and not seeing ourselves represented and thinking that there's this Eurocentric beauty standard that we didn't fit. Do you have experiences where you felt othered or where you felt like you stood out because of your ethnicity?
Yeah, I could speak about this all day. There are so many instances. I went to a predominantly white school. Not only that, it was a predominantly white evangelical Christian school. Most of the students being very strictly religious and very strictly white. And also me not knowing or understanding what a lot of that demographic believed about minorities at the time. I just remember thinking, why does everyone think I'm so different and so ugly? I was definitely this ugly duckling type. I had braces and glasses. I was super awkward. I was super skinny and tall. And my mom would always send me to school in clothes maybe 2 sizes too large for me. Partially, it was because she didn't want anyone to ever sexualize me. And this way, no one will ever possibly think of Summer in that way. I wasn't allowed to choose my clothes before high school. And we also had uniforms. And so I just looked awkward. I was very shy for the large part of my 1st to 8th grade experience. But I wouldn't say I was ever overtly bullied. People just would leave me out of things. It wasn't like they would say anything mean to my face, but it was just certain things that I would overhear, or really strange backhanded compliments. Someone saying, Summer, I think you would be so pretty if you just weren't so dark. And I remember thinking, I don't know what to say to this. I literally don't have a response. Is that nice? There was another cheerleader who would always have a Halloween party at her house. And all the popular kids would get an invite. Even the not so popular, but not unpopular kids would get invited. And I always wanted to get an invite. Never did. Right? It was just little things where I wasn't necessarily included in things, and I wanted so badly to just be whiter so I could fit in better and understand these kids better. But my parents were so strict about so many things. I wasn't even allowed to go over to people's houses for sleepovers or anything. So I was very sheltered. And also there's a very clear cultural difference between me and most of the kids at my school. I was always really drawn to the other minority kids in my class. I just felt more comfortable with them. Growing up from 1st to 6th grade, my best friend was this really adorable, freckled Latina girl. And then 7th and 8th grade, my best friend was this half Filipino girl. I was always drawn to other minorities who just looked a little bit more like me. And I do not really look fondly upon those years of my life, because I wasn't ostracized, but at the same time, I knew I wasn't included. And I knew that part of it had to do with the way I looked and the lack of my social life at that point. It was very much, Summer, you go to school for school, you come back, you do your homework, you do really well, and you're going to be the best in your class. That's all that matters. Everything else does not matter. It was strictly all about academics, and social life was absolutely non-existent because that was not important at all to my parents. And my parents were also just working a lot just to afford to have me go to this private school, and as well to my private high school that I eventually did go off to. But I have to say, one of the reasons why I'm not particularly drawn to religion these days is because of my experience at that Christian school. Not just during the time that I was there, the time after, where I no longer went to school with them. That was the time where social media started blooming. I was at a much more progressive and diverse high school, which was a really great experience for me. I started trying to reconnect with people that I had grown up with and was getting pretty mean messages back. We're not friends. You're ugly. We never were friends. Why would you possibly add me on MySpace? Okay, I didn't know you were this hostile. I wasn't trying to offend anyone by me trying to add you. I was just trying to be nice and see what people were doing. Yeah, and I never understood that. All the kids were on MySpace, and I just thought, why not reconnect with people that I grew up with? But it was at that point where I realized how they really viewed me. There were clear reasons why I wasn't being invited to things. It was tough for me initially getting responses like that from those people, but at the same time, I remember feeling so grateful that the people that I was going to school with in high school were so much more accepting and so diverse. If high school was the first time I really had a bunch of Asian friends, I remember thinking, oh wow, I feel like I really fit in here. Yeah. And I'd never had that feeling in my life before. Definitely, it's where I got to become more cultured and learn more about different people's experiences, and also where I got to learn about music other than classical music, really. So there was just a lot of growth that happened with me in high school. I found more people like me. I was able to relate to them a lot better and started self-loathing a little less. Up till that point, I would say I really wanted to be white. It was in high school when I made friends with these really cool Asian kids. My parents really liked them too. So it was at that time that I began to spread my wings and really started to enjoy my adolescence and not having to worry about being othered. That suddenly was more of a background worry instead of being at the forefront most of the time. I never realized until that point how much of a difference that would make.
So being in music as an instrumentalist, I wonder how that has been for you, both as an AAPI person, but also as a female. Because I know that many of the instrumentalists that I've met have had a lot of sexism that they've had to deal with. So I'm interested to hear what your experience has been.
Ooh, okay. So before I actually get into my own experience, so I have this AAPI musicians blog. I think I've interviewed 70 different people within the industry. One of the questions that I do ask is about what adversity people have faced within the music industry being an AAPI, or conversely, if being an AAPI has ever helped them in any sort of way within the music industry. And across the board, there's a few exceptions, but almost all the women that I've asked this question have had significantly more struggles than the men. That was super striking to see, but at the same time, not entirely surprising because of my own experience. And there have been many. The first one that I remember was when I was at the Balboa Bay Resort. There was another pianist who was also playing. He was in a jazz trio. The pianist in that trio was this white male. He would come in and get drunk and leave trash on the piano every time. And I remember always having to clean up after him every time I would have to play and getting a little frustrated with him. But I remember getting a stern talking to from one of the managers saying that they would prefer if I did not drink until after the set, which I would have one drink during the set, usually halfway through during brunch. Meanwhile, I found out this guy would sometimes already be drunk before he even started and would pound 3 or 4 drinks. I do not mind not having a drink until after my set. That is fine by me. However, the double standard is what really bothered me. Also telling me that me wearing certain dresses was inappropriate, which I remember thinking was so strange because I had specifically bought these really elegant dresses for that setting because it is a much more like upscale vibe over there. And I remember thinking, I'm not wearing anything particularly scandalous. I was very confused why he wanted to micromanage how I was dressing. And he was even suggesting, oh, maybe you should just wear what the waiters are wearing, a white shirt and khakis. I don't think that's really the experience the customers are really asking for at this point. But I was really confused why he wasn't micromanaging the man, the other pianist. Meanwhile, this guy one time apparently even passed out at the piano because he was so drunk during a set. And I would never do something even remotely as unprofessional as that. And he would never get reprimanded for any of it. That double standard just truly pissed me off. Other times when I would cold call people, I have a great instance where I went over to this place. I saw that most nights were filled, but I thought in case you guys want to add another pianist to the lineup or you need a sub, I would love to audition for that. And at first the manager's like, there's no reason, we have people, it's fine. We don't really want to look at anyone else. And I was like, please just let me have 20 minutes of your time. I'll play for free and we'll be patrons. We'll buy lunch. Okay, fine. You get 20 minutes. You can go play. But before I went, he was like, there's a guy who plays here and he's incredible. And it's going to be very unlikely you're as good as him or better than him. And I just remember thinking, that's a strange comment to make to me. And then he said, also, what would you expect in terms of payment? At least 50 an hour. And he's like, oh, the only person we pay 50 an hour is this guy. And unfortunately, you're probably not up to his standard. So 3 hours for $100. And I was like, I won't do it for any less than 150. Let's see what you think after I play. I should add that I did play. And halfway through, he sends the guy just taking reservations at the front, the host, motions him over to him. He says something to him, slips him something. And the kid comes over to me. Oh, my uncle says you're hired. And here's a 20 for your time. And your rate is 50 an hour. And I was like, okay, thank you. I'm glad that you see it now. But I just thought it was so funny he had to say all of that to me before he even heard me play. Oh, you couldn't possibly be good as this one guy. Why would you possibly say that without hearing anything? How could you judge me already? And in his defense, he did change his mind and did give me a shot, and I did really appreciate that. But it's just that double standard continues to frustrate me, even playing with new musicians that I haven't played with. And I know they mean it in a more harmless way. I'll start playing, they're like, oh wow, you can shred. I haven't heard a girl shred like that before. I understand that it's supposed to be a compliment, but at the same time, just because I'm a girl, you didn't think I could do it. That's just strange. And it's funny because there are people who are phenomenal that I truly look up to, who are women, who are slaying, that are better than most men in the industry, and just have put up with so much sexism, having to deal with it. And I just think, oh my goodness, not only am I offended whenever I get a comment like that, I'm offended for them because they're better than me and they have to put up with this too. Are you kidding me? It's just infuriating.
Yeah, that is very strange because of all the instruments, I would say piano has the most prominent female instrumentalists.
I agree. There are lots of women playing piano and lots of Asian women playing piano too. I always felt like I was part of the stereotype. It's always striking to me when people say something to the tune of, wow, you're a woman and you can do that? That's incredible.
I know.
Really? That's what's the shocking part of that whole statement? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Have you had any experiences like that with people where you were comfortable enough to tell them, do you realize that this is sexist?
I don't think I've ever called out somebody. And I've wanted to, but I feel like usually in that situation, I'm worried that if I do, I'll lose a job, money, etc., because I don't know how people are going to take it.
Yeah.
And I feel like I should, because then I would be helping society progress, but at the same time choosing whether it's going to be potentially losing this paycheck or...
Yeah.
And I have to say that I feel lucky in that, at least currently where I am, the male colleagues I do have are all extremely progressive and intelligent, great advocates for women in the workplace. So I don't really deal with much of that currently. There's every so often that'll happen. I'm just really glad that the people that I've surrounded myself with are just great people. So I don't have to have that conversation. They already understand.
When you've worked for a woman, have you noticed a difference?
Oof, sometimes. And it's not always positive, unfortunately. I've had a few different experiences where I went into a situation and found out that one of the people who would be managing me would be a woman. I was really excited and I went into it with such a positive mindset thinking, oh, these people will hopefully take me more seriously. And then would be disappointed because I would find out that said woman would view me as a threat. Oh, now there's another woman here as well, and there's really only space for one of us. And I'm here being like, no, there's space for all of us. Why are we not just uplifting each other? I think it's so cool to work with other women. I'm constantly trying to work with other women. Some people just, unfortunately, have maybe been beaten down too much by the patriarchy, and they think maybe this is the only way is if I put down other women so that I can rise. I mean, I understand why they might do that, but it's just really disappointing, especially in 2022. You think that would be a thing of the past, but I do see that an unfortunate amount where other women seem to be threatened by me or my friends just because we're women and we're good at what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. Women are just the best and I have the best experiences, and I think, thank goodness, I'm working with this person who understands and who has fought so hard herself to really help other women in the industry and establish herself in the industry. For instance, my friend Autumn, I cannot speak more highly of her. She just won a Grammy with John Batiste. She's a songwriter. She's absolutely incredible. She's worked with every name you could possibly think of. I love working with other women because you guys work the hardest of everyone and you just get it. You understand because we've all dealt with sexism. There's so many great people that I get to work with who are women, and I'm just so grateful for all of them. I run an all-female orchestral ensemble. I have an all-female backing band called Jams. Even my own personal original project, GRP, that's myself and amazing drummer, Jessica Bordeaux. We just had our first show the other day, and I hired all women, a female violinist, female harpist, female bass player, and everyone just killed it. I just love surrounding myself with women who are down to just work hard and I know are just absolutely phenomenal at what they do. Because I know so many of us exist and just so few of us get the opportunity to show how good we are. So if there's an opportunity for me to put another woman on, I'm always going to take it. Yeah, I hope that answers that question.
It does. Have you noticed a difference interacting with white women versus women of color? And how has that been?
I'd say I'm lucky for the most part in that I feel like most of the white women in my life, as there are many, are allies or try their best to be allies, are constantly learning, but are really good advocates for BIPOC women. However, sometimes you'll come across someone who doesn't understand the privilege she has being a white woman and will make certain assumptions or treat you a certain way because of that. And it's frustrating, but it's definitely a less frustrating option than dealing with most men, unfortunately. But like I was mentioning, some of the female people who see me as some sort of threat when I view them as a potential ally have been white women. There's definitely learning that can be done. I'd say on both sides, too. I'm sure there's ways that I could have better strategic and educational conversations that could lead to other people understanding my perspective and them learning how to better themselves and myself. And there's definitely a better way forward for all of us. There's a lot we can all do.
Yeah. Speaking of that, how did you decide to start the API Musician blog? What was the impetus?
Oh boy, I had thought about it way back, probably 2016. It was because I went to some auditions back then through this guy who was pretty notable for putting together backing bands in LA. This first audition that I went to, I remember he pulled me aside right after I had played and he's like, I have to tell you, you're definitely the best keys player that's auditioned today. And then he pauses, but you're not going to get this gig. And I remember looking at him, oh, okay, that's not what I was expecting to hear next, but okay. And he said, you don't quite have the look. Maybe it'll be more obvious when they put out the photo of who they do choose. And so a week later, a photo came out. They were all like wearing matching outfits. I was like, I called him immediately after. I was like, did I have to come wearing this outfit or something? Because there's no way I would have known this, right? He's like, no. He's like, they just really wanted an all-white band. We just couldn't say it. I remember thinking, oh, that seems very limiting. But also, why did I waste my time coming out here if that's what was the criteria that was unsaid? And there was another instance, same person hosting the audition, where I found out they wanted an all-black band. And I was like, there are people who do put out audition blasts that say they want specifically an all-black band. So I don't know why they didn't just put that. That I understand a little bit more because at least it's for a black artist. They want to empower other black musicians. It makes more sense when it is uplifting the BIPOC community. At the same time, I remember seeing that, being like, is there ever going to be a situation where people are looking for someone like me, this random Asian brown girl? Because it really seems like there isn't. And I was getting really frustrated that despite having put in the work and effort and it supposedly somewhat paying off because I was, quote, the best in the room, that I still wasn't going to get these opportunities because I wasn't white or I wasn't black. It seemed obvious to me really early on that if I wasn't white or black, I was just not going to have a lot of opportunity, because the only times I really would see Asian people in the industry were almost strictly in classical settings or in ethno-specific realms like K-pop, J-pop, Bollywood. And it's of course, that's already saturated with Asian people because those are Asian genres. But outside of that, so few AAPIs and even Latinx. The music industry, at least what I've seen in LA, is primarily white and black. And if you are not one of those, it's going to be tougher to get roles because they are usually looking for white or black people. Yeah, I just have felt really othered because of that early on. And because of that, I thought there has to be other people like me. There have to be other AAPIs in the industry. And I just wish I could connect with them. So that was what led me to starting the blog. But then I just didn't have the time or resources to really get it off the ground until the pandemic, basically. I have time now. I have so much time because I don't have as much work, unfortunately. But I'd done a lot of reflecting on my own identity during that time. It really really made me realize that I think it would be really important to try and connect as many people as possible, because I think once you hear other people's stories, you feel more heard yourself. You also gain the perspective that they have, and it's only going to help you see things in a better light. So yeah, I just started crafting very specific questions that I wanted to ask and reaching out to different people, the ones that I already did know, and asking them if they had known people and just building it that way. That's really how it got started.
I feel like the pandemic for so many people was a chance to do the passion project. I love that you were able to use that time to put something together like this. It's something I would have wanted to see as a kid. Sherry and I, as musicians now, we try and be the people that we would have wanted to see when we were kids. I hadn't realized how much of a difference having a community of other AAPI people would make.
Oh, absolutely. So one of the questions I ask is, what are your hopes for the AAPI community in music for the future? And a lot of the responses I get are that they don't really feel like there is much of a community at the moment. And I do feel that too, because there's some, but I feel like it's definitely still in its infancy. And because the term AAPI is such a large umbrella term, I'd say I see mostly only East Asians really bonding with each other. I feel like a lot of Southeast Asians and South Asians are excluded from these conversations, which is just really interesting to me in particular, because I'm half Chinese, half Indian. And so I do have that East Asian half. However, I do not look it. I know most people see me, they don't think I'm Chinese. They would never know my mom's full Chinese. Because of that, it's really interesting connecting with Southeast Asian and South Asian people who are in the industry, because they're even more overlooked, unfortunately, than East Asians in the music industry. Just subsets of the API world are still not even on equal footing with the rest of the AAPI world in the music industry. And Pacific Islanders, right? You can't forget the PI and the AAPI. There's so many people that are marginalized, and I would just love to try and do my little part to help amplify their thoughts and perspectives.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the Southeast Asian and South Asians marginalized, because I remember during previous AAPI Heritage Months, I would only see East Asians, and it's weird that I feel left out during a month that is supposed to specifically celebrate people like me, but there's not a single Filipino on this panel. I feel like most people, when they think Asian American, they do think East Asian. They don't necessarily think South Asian or Southeast Asian. So I think having conversations so that people can broaden their definitions of what an Asian person actually is important.
Yeah, it's definitely really important. And I'm hoping that your podcast, my little blog, at some point, it'll grow enough so that, like you were saying, the younger generations can look to it and be like, oh, I am included in this. There is someone that looks like me. And there's someone not only that looks like me, but is doing the thing that I really want to do and is proof that it can happen.
And it's also for the parents too, right? Because our parents are just telling us the best that they know. The best that they know is doctors get paid, lawyers get paid, accountants get paid, musicians maybe not. They don't know that there is actually kind of a middle class musician that you can make a living and be fine, but not be Beyonce.
Exactly. There's so many tiers of success within the music industry, and so many paths to get to those tiers. Yeah. There's so many different hats you can wear, and it's definitely not one particular route that you have to take to be a musician. It could be so many different things. Something that I really loved about the feedback that I got from that blog last year, one of the guys I interviewed, this guy named David Baki, he actually showed his interview after he completed it to his mother, and he told me afterwards that it gave him the opportunity to have this conversation that he would have never had with her otherwise, and really share what he's doing, and made her much more proud of the fact that he's doing music. And I just thought that was so wonderful, because so many of the parents, like you were saying, they don't have that perspective, right? So many of them immigrated here and they were like, okay, what's the quickest way to turn things around in one generation, basically? Who gets paid? Doctors, lawyers. Okay, that's what you're going to be, because that's going to be what we consider to be the easiest way to get our family to have some sort of financial success and really establish ourselves in America. It's definitely tough. I know my parents still aren't fully on board. It's just one of those things that once people start seeing and understanding and being willing to have the conversations, more parents are going to be able to hopefully turn a corner and see why having a music career is so important to so many of us.
And also, I think the idea that you have to stick with one career in your life, it's a myth. So many of the most successful people have changed careers so many times. There's this great book that I love called Range: Why Generalists Thrive in a Specialist World. And it's a great book with a lot of examples of some of the most successful people in the world. And they were successful actually because they had experiences from completely different fields and they just brought new insight. That's one of the things that I'm trying to get my family to understand too. It's okay, if I do this and let's say someday I decided that was not such a great idea, I can always go and do something else. There's definitely a lot of room for change in our life that I think the older generation is not used to. Because for them, it was like, we need to survive and we need to do one thing that we are allowed to do. So there's still this mentality of take the safest job you will get and just work hard.
Exactly.
Through that, through all their hard work, hopefully we can say that we're past that now. Now we have options.
Yeah, we're not just limited to those options sometimes our parents really want to limit us to. We were allowed the white people options now. We can have jobs that are more abstract and more creative, and something that we can prioritize is fulfillment and not just financial need.
That would be a good segue into the other things we want to talk about is mental health. Doing something with our careers that will be good for our mental health, because a lot of times we pick those doctors, accountant, and engineer careers that we get paid well, but then we're miserable doing it. I would rather do something I love that I get paid a little bit less.
Absolutely. I remember learning that early on. I wasn't a lawyer yet, but I was thinking I was going to be. But working at that law firm and speaking to partners, especially this one who was a hobby musician, his name was John, and he was very kind to me. And he was one of the people who actually encouraged me to pursue music because they had an in-office happy hour. They asked me to bring my keyboard in because they had heard, oh, she has a YouTube channel, she plays piano. And he heard me play and he was just like, why are you working here? If I had half of what you had, I would not be a lawyer. And I just really hope that you take advantage of the hard work you clearly have already put into this instrument and do something with it, because not everyone can do that. It's something I already was passionate about, right? And something that I used really as a mental health tool when I was in college. I would play piano on this little dinky keyboard that I had in my apartment just to de-stress when I was studying for finals or midterms. And that's what it was for me because I wasn't a music major. It was nice that I had that separation. I'm really glad I did not major in music specifically because music during that time was a de-stressor for me. It was something I loved and I was passionate about and I could use to help take care of my mental health better. Now it's my profession, so it's slightly different, but the fact that I can do what you're passionate about is so much better than when I was working at the law firm, working long hours and thinking, is this going to be my life? I'm looking at all the partners' desks right next to mine who are working from 4 a.m. to midnight and sleeping in their offices and not going home to see their families and missing out on their kids' birthday parties because they have work. Sure, they're making $900 an hour. That's incredible. But at what cost? That's not the life I want to live. I did not prioritize my mental health. And the older I get, the more I realize how important it is in just my general health, too. Like, I did not know how my mental health could affect my physical health, the consequences of that. Now I'm so glad that this is what I'm pursuing because I know that my life would be so much more miserable if I weren't.
Yeah. One thing that I've found with Asian families, though, they think that if you choose music as a career, they think that's just easy peasy, smooth sailing. All you do is have fun. And people don't realize that it is actually a job. You have to work hard at it and you have to put in a lot of hours, but you're just putting in a lot of hours doing something you love.
Exactly. I feel like the reward is larger, not necessarily financially, but in terms of fulfillment. Like, this is day 2 that I'm having, like, post an absolutely crazy, busy 2 weeks where I was just living and breathing music and everything that comes along with it, including the administrative work and things like that, right? Mm-hmm. I swear, it was actually crazy. I don't know how I survived. I think I was sleeping an average of 4 hours a night, and it was really rough for 2 weeks. But now that I'm coming out of it, I'm so happy of the work that I've done and the people that I've done it with. It is just so fulfilling. I'm so glad I didn't choose anything else to do because the last 2 weeks, while extremely stressful and not just a fun career, you know, like there was just so much work that had to go into it. I am so glad that I put that work in to make it happen. And I would not trade it for anything else.
If you're going to work 4 a.m. to midnight, might as well be something you love doing.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So what does an ally look like to you?
Anyone who is willing to help. It doesn't mean that necessarily this person already has all the answers or understands your perspective, because truly none of us really understand each other's perspectives. We can only try our best. Listen to people's stories and their thoughts and see what they have to say and learn from that, right? We're all constantly learning. Something that does frustrate me is when people are really hardline of an ally has to know this and do this. It would be great if they knew all of these things and acted exactly in a certain way. But I feel like as long as someone is truly trying, for me, intent is a large part of it. An ally is someone who intends to help someone who is not quite like them, help them further their career or something within the music industry. One of my allies and someone I consider to be a mentor is this guy named Jay Deal. He's an incredible Black man, incredible person, incredible human. And he straight up told me early on that it's going to be tougher for you because you're not Black or white in the music industry. And you're a woman. People are not going to take you as seriously. I think he's an absolutely phenomenal ally. He's an absolutely phenomenal musician who has incredible amount of credits to his names, and they're all extremely deserved. He did not have to give me the advice he has given me, or taken the time to be my friend and really treat me like family, essentially. He didn't have to do that. And I don't expect him to just automatically understand my experience, because while we both are minorities, my experience is going to be vastly different than his. But he takes so much time, and we always check in with each other about our mental health. Yeah, just people like that. Anyone truly in the music industry. Another person I definitely need to shout out is my friend Christian, who has just been such an advocate for me within the music industry. He works for Jamcard, and he's just a phenomenal human being who clearly cares about other musicians. He doesn't matter what people's social status, I know so much of LA's social status and what numbers you have, what credits you have. He doesn't care about any of that. He just wants to get good people and give people opportunities, and just people like that who truly are working to help others and willing to learn if they don't know the answer for something. I love when people just truly are willing to learn. That's the biggest quality that I want to see in an ally.
We've talked a bit about what has been difficult in the industry. Were there any pleasant surprises where you felt like, oh, this wasn't as hard as I thought it would be?
Really just getting more gigs was a pleasant surprise. Once you get the ball rolling and you have gigs that you've gotten that are with people more established than you, it is so much easier when those people vouch for you to get more gigs. It is still constant grinding. It's just not the same amount of constant grinding in the same way. As long as you go and give your best and are a good human at all these gigs you have, that's going to lead to more gigs regardless. If I am able to do this, someone with absolutely zero music industry background, friends, because like, as everyone knows, it's who you know in the industry. It really just takes one or two gigs where you've worked with people who have, I guess, more quote clout than you to take a chance on you and vouch for you. That can lead to more gigs. And I was so shocked at one gig leading to another and thinking, oh, wow, I didn't realize this was going to continue to pay forward in my career for so long. That, and then also just in general, I wasn't even sure at the beginning that cold calling would work at all. I wouldn't say it was easy, because it wasn't easy, but it's one of those things where just statistics come into play. If you call a large number of people out of just sheer percentages, someone will probably be interested, but you just have to cast a really wide net. So not necessarily easier than expected, but I'm just surprised it worked at all, because it really is a lot of work. So I don't know if anything in the music industry is easier than I thought it would be. I think everything is still tough and requires a lot of dedication and work, lots of time. But also, okay, surrounding yourself with good people. I feel like that's not necessarily a music industry thing. I think that's living life in general. Once you find a few really good people, you tend to attract other really great people. I've become very selective with who I spend my time with, because I don't know, I'm 33 right now. I don't need to be spending time with people I'm not particularly close with, that I don't necessarily have my values aligned with, right? I mean, I'm not going to say I'm going to be rude to those people. Absolutely not. I'm just not going to make time in my life for those people, because I know who I value, who I trust, whose opinions I can really rely on. And once I found a few of those, it was much easier to find more. And I feel really lucky in that sense. I have a really good group of people that I've surrounded myself with that like, even if I change career paths at some point, I'm definitely not 100% set that I'm only going to be a musician. Honestly, now looking forward, I think maybe at some point I will want to potentially go to law school, not for my parents, but for myself, seeing how many times people have gotten screwed over in the music industry because they don't understand the little nuances within contracts, or just not knowing to put something in a contract, things like that, or just not having a contract in general. Little things like that where you're just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
There's so many loopholes and ways people can get screwed over that if I were a lawyer, I could help not only myself, but my friends further their careers this way. And I find it fascinating in that sense. How can I help myself and my friends not get screwed in the music industry? So it would be more of what can I do to further my career in a non-traditional way? I don't know. I honestly kind of miss school. I don't miss midterms. I do not miss finals, but I do miss learning. I do miss being able to go to a lecture and coming out and, wow, I'm much more knowledgeable now than I was an hour ago.
Yeah.
There's so many other things I want to explore. I wish I could go back and study Asian American studies, learn more about this, especially now with the AAPI blog and speaking to more AAPIs. I want to learn more about the Asian diaspora and Asian history in general. There's so much I don't know.
Yeah. One thing that we didn't quite touch on is you said your mom is Chinese and your dad is Indian. Growing up, did you feel like you were in between?
Yeah. Okay. So it's interesting. I don't know if I really fit in the term Hapa, but since I'm half and half, just different types of Asian, I still usually call myself Hapa. But yes, it was very confusing for me growing up. And it's mainly because I know much more about my Chinese culture and heritage than I do my Indian culture and heritage. But I look physically way more Indian than I do Chinese. And so I didn't spend as much time with my cousins or family on my father's side, but I did spend a lot of time with my mom's Chinese side. I knew my cousins on that side of the family much better than I did my dad's side of the family. As of late, I've really reconnected with some of my cousins on my father's side of the family, which has been so illuminating in so many different ways. But I have to say, it definitely was a struggle knowing that I didn't really look like all of the cousins that I was hanging out with on my mom's side. Everyone was definitely lighter skinned than I was. I was the brown one. And I would get comments not only from my mother, but also from other family members on her side of the family saying, oh, you should stay inside. You're really dark. You don't want to look black. And I remember thinking, what's wrong with being dark or looking black? And of course, I don't know if they would say these things nowadays, honestly. I haven't heard them say something quite as racist, but it was very obvious to me that even within my own family, I was very different. And I didn't like it. I remember wishing back when I was religious, this is a stupid thing to pray for, but I literally would pray that I would wake up with my mother's skin tone sometimes. Why can't I just be lighter like my mom? Why do I have to have dark skin like my dad? Which I'm sure at the time probably really messed up my father because unfortunately, like my mom's side of the family definitely played into it even more. And it was just, oh, you don't want dark skin. You don't want to be brown or black. That is bad. And I didn't understand why. They're like, you have to stay indoors more. Everyone else can go outside, but you have to stay indoors. That was probably one of the main reasons that to this day, I'm so used to doing way more indoor activities than outdoor because that was just what I was taught growing up.
Do you still feel self-conscious about that you want to be lighter?
No. It was really in high school when I realized that was something that was essentially taught to me, but I didn't know why it was bad. My two best friends are also brown and they're really cool. And so if they're cool and they're brown, it's cool to be brown. But prior to that, it was definitely much tougher. Yeah, college and high school were definitely very diverse. And I had lots of friends in both places who were definitely not white or light-skinned. And it really made me appreciate my skin tone much more. I think it's beautiful instead of just feeling really ugly because of it. Yeah, it did take a while, but I would say it was probably around 14 to 16 when I started feeling okay about it. It took a while.
Yeah, it's a lot to unlearn. I had family tell me the same thing. In my family, most of the people are dark skinned. Most Filipinos have dark skin. And my family would tell me, don't go outside. I would wear a ton of sunscreen. And for skin cancer reasons, obviously that's a good thing. But at the time I was doing it because I was like, oh, I can't get tanned. And so it really does mess with you. That used to be something where as a kid being told you can't go play outside because you're going to get dark it teaches you that, at least for me, the only reason I was considered attractive was because I had light skin and I had to protect it. That was something I had to move past and unlearn as I got older. And I had cousins who were darker skinned who would try the skin lightening products. There's a whole industry in the Philippines for that.
Same, for South Asians, Yeah, so much of the world now is just obsessed with Eurocentric features and any sort of aesthetic. Oh, it's depressing, but not surprising that skin lightening products are so widely used. So
Yeah.
Having interviewed over 70 AAPI musicians, what was your number one takeaway?
oh boy. My number one takeaway is that the AAPI umbrella is huge, and there's no one story that is representative of the rest of the AAPI umbrella. Everyone has a unique perspective. There are so many perspectives that comprise the term AAPI, and we could all learn from each other's stories. There were almost no two identical stories. There were some that had a lot of similarities, whether it's positive or negative experiences growing up in America or elsewhere and then immigrating to America, and whether or not being an AAPI has ever helped them in the music industry or hurt them, experiencing any overt racism or sexism, etc. All those questions were answered differently by everybody, and I was shocked to see how many different perspectives there were. A very hopeful takeaway for me was that there are so many different ways to end up a musician. There's no one particular path. You can come from any of these backgrounds and it can still work. You're going to have to work really hard, but as long as you put in the work, I think it's possible for anyone. And hopefully the more of us who see that pioneer that path, because we're still definitely at the beginning of that wave. The more of us who do that, the more it's going to be better for the next generation. I've already had random people reach out to me saying, oh, wow, I'm in college and I didn't know anyone who looked like me growing up, or with a similar story. And it's really great to see that you were able to do it. Maybe I can try and at least do music on the side. Maybe I'll make it a part-time thing. And even hearing that already for me has made it worth it. Because however you can help change things for the better for the future, I would love to try and do my small role in that.
That's awesome. Definitely the visibility is huge, and none of us had it when we were kids, and we wish we did, and hopefully we are creating what we wanted.
Absolutely. I think a large reason as to why my parents are so skeptical about music, aside from it obviously not being like a prestigious career, unless you were like huge, I think is because my parents also knew they didn't see anyone that looked like us on TV years ago when Justin Timberlake was still the biggest. I remember my dad saying, no one on TV looks like you. If you're going to try and do music, it's not going to work out because look at how these successful people look. You do not look anything like them. It wasn't that my parents just didn't believe in me. I think they do. I think they're just like, you have to be practical, Summer. This is not the space that is created for us in America. We're going to make space for us. Yeah. That's what we have to do. We have to force ourselves in there and make other people uncomfortable. We make other people uncomfortable, but it's going to only make it better for future generations.
Yeah. When I've told white people that my parents would say this to me, they're like, oh, that's so mean. I'm like, no, you don't understand. It's not mean. It's realistic. They're not making it up. Like, it's true. We got to carve out our little space here.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like definitely with the way things are trending, at least in film and TV, with Crazy Rich Asians, everything, everywhere, all at once, movies like that I just leave the theater and I feel so, I guess empowered is the right term, but just really proud to be Asian.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to see more films like that. It's so great to know that those powerful films are just the beginning of this movement and that we're only going to continue to see more diversity. That Mindy Kaling show, never have I ever. Because it's like I mentioned, even South Asian representation in particular is still lacking. When I saw, there's a brown girl lead, this is great. And it really does seem to like delineate her struggles being brown in a white society and how relatable that is. And I know so many kids love this show and they're like, oh, she's so cool and relatable. And I'm like, yeah, brown girls can be cool and relatable. They're not just some weird other. So it's really great that also a bunch of white kids are watching these shows and are realizing, wow, people are growing up differently than us, but they're still awesome people, and learning that at a much younger age than I think a lot of other people like around our ages took to learn these same things.
Well, I know you're a very busy person. We won't keep you too long. We are going to end the interview with a few rapid fire questions. These are one word or one phrase answers you don't have to explain, but you can if you want to.
Okay, sounds good.
What's an Asian food that you should like but don't?
Durian.
What's an Asian food that you'll never get tired of?
Pad Thai.
What's the first language you learned?
English.
What language do you speak with your parents?
I would say in kind of Singlish because that's Singaporean English. There's random Malay thrown in because of that specific Southeast Asian region.
What is your favorite piece or song to perform?
Honestly, these days, it's really my own music. It's not one song in particular. Probably there's two that I really love, and it's probably my original composition, JFN, that I wrote for my husband. It means so much to me because I wrote it for him. And then the other one is a song that I wrote for my band called Storm. My band is GRP. But both of them are just really fun to play and a little bit technically challenging too, so not necessarily straightforward. So it's still a little bit of a challenge, but not too hard where I can still not be solely focused on, oh my gosh, what's my fingering and am I going to hit this run in time?
Most overrated piece or piece that you dislike playing?
I wouldn't say overrated, but just because it's so widely requested. Yuruma, what is that song? River in Me or whatever it's called. Literally everyone. They're like, you're Asian and you play piano. You must play Yuruma. I think it's beautiful, but my goodness, just way too over-requested.
Oh my God. My parents always ask for that song. When I was in college, there's pianos in the student union building. And someone would sit down and just start playing it. And I would be like, no.
Yes, 100%.
Favorite gig you've ever played?
Ooh, gosh, that's so tough. I'd say now it's tied because I just played my own project's first show. We just played our first show on Saturday. That's tied probably with my gig that I played with Circus Revive, which was the first touring gig I ever had in my life. Because we played the Shrine in LA, that show, and it was almost sold out. And it was a building filled with almost 5,000 people. I had gotten to write this piano and string arrangement for this song. It was what I wanted to do, and I never thought I would actually be able to do it. So that was such a really defining moment in my career that was just very validating. So that, plus also this last night, because it was the first time I played solely my own original music. So I'd say they're both tied for first.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. Before we let you go, do you want to let our listeners know how they can get in touch with you?
Sure. Thank you guys, first of all, for having me. This has been really fun. I've really enjoyed our conversation. You can find me on everything pretty much as Summer Swee-Singh. I know my name is tricky to spell, so it's SWE-SINGH. But for all my handles, there's no hyphen. So it's just Summer Swee-Singh on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and then my full name with the hyphen and everything on Spotify, as well as GRP. So my band is called GRP and our handle is Get a GRP. A lot of people think GRP stands for grip. It doesn't. But because of that, so Get a GRP. And that's our handle on Instagram and all of that as well. Thank you so much.
Here are our takeaways for today's episode. Number 1. Statistically, if you cold call enough potential clients, you're bound to get a few good leads. Number 2, the first gig is often the hardest to land, but each gig opens doors to more opportunities, so always put your best foot forward and blow their socks off. Number 3, women in the music industry are often assumed to be less competent than men before they even play their first note. Their looks are also micromanaged, while men are rarely ever getting any comments on their outfits. If you ever find yourself questioning a woman's abilities or criticizing her outfit in your head, stop yourself and ask, would I ask these same questions if she was my white male buddy? If not, congratulations, you have just recognized a subconscious bias that you now have the power to address. Number 4, women can also be sexist towards other women and often are, so we need to examine ourselves too and choose to uplift each other instead. Number 5, lack of transparency in audition causes many like Summer to waste their time on tryouts that were never going to land them anything anyway because of their race, ethnicity, or gender. While bands can't publicly say that they want an all-white band, they are still free to only hire white performers after auditioning a diverse group of people. This loophole hurts people of color. Number 6, a career in music isn't limited to either starving musician or Beyoncé-level fame. There are so many career paths and so many ways to get there. But more importantly, there is a middle class where you can be successful and financially stable without being a household name. Number 7, careers don't have to be static. Number 8, if you want your kids to learn an instrument, let them play music they love. Playing an instrument takes years of training before you can finally enjoy playing. Forcing kids to listen to and play only classical music can make it even more of a chore for them. Number 9, seeing Asian Americans represented in Lincoln Park was huge for both Summer and I. Representation inspires people to consider paths that they didn't think were possible for them before. That's partly why Summer created the AAPI Musician blog, and also why the Nuances podcast interviews people from many different career paths. Be sure to check out Summer's AAPI Musician blog once you finish this episode. And finally, money is important, but it isn't everything. Our fulfillment, our physical health, mental health, and time spent with loved ones are all equally important variables in the equation for success. Thank you for tuning in. We're leaving you today with a song by Summer's band GRP called Storm. That's it for today. I'll see you next week for another nuanced conversation.